Welcome, Seeker, to Mystic Praxis, a charming podcast at the crossroads where the eclectic meets the divine. Join us as we play with integrating spiritual pathmaking and modern culture to make our everyday lives more mindful, mystical, and magical, and to share what we learn along the way. Whether you're a longtime skeptic or down for some full-on witchy woo-woo, this lo-fi, high-vibe series has got you covered. Hey there, seekers and skeptics. Welcome back to another episode of Mystic Praxis. It's me, your host, Alia Lex, and I am delighted that you are joining me for a discussion on a topic of how we can make our lives, our everyday lives, even more magical and meaningful and mystical. And I hope that you're having a wonderful summer, because it's a really weird year. There's a lot going on. That said, I hope you're able to tap into some of the excitement and change, and also that you are spending time outside or with friends and family or reading great books or whatever lights you up. And I hope that this time is able to hold, you're able to hold some space for that, as well as all of the other things that are going on and taking place. So the number one question that I have been getting from folks about this is not so much details of any one particular area of my magical exploration, but a really good, solid question, which is, where do I start? How do I get started bringing more magic into my life? And so I'm going to share a little bit about my journey here, and then I'm going to explain to you why that is not a path that you should necessarily attempt to follow for yourself. And then I'm going to share with you 3 secrets of magical living that I think will be useful, and we'll take it from there. A little bit about my background. So I was a weird kid growing up with a lot of different interests. I was constantly reading. I was constantly playing make-believe. I was constantly drawing and writing and creating art. And when I look back at what I was reading and what I was play acting at and what I was creating as far as art, it was all very magical. An example is I read a lot of fantasy and science fiction, some things that would border on horror, which is fairly common for kids, right, to read fairy tales, but also science fiction and fantasy for young kids like Lloyd Alexander or Diana Wynne Jones, books and stories like that. So maybe what would have been the equivalent of Harry Potter, and some of those series are still big today, but I definitely cleared out the library as far as books of that genre. And then I spent a lot of time play acting and playing make-believe. This is something that I did on my own, also with friends around the neighborhood, and sometimes it involved, playing with dolls or action figures or building things out of Legos and having stories around them as they were getting built. Other times it would be a group of kids and we would be playing in someone's backyard and we would be making up some kind of story. So we weren't just playing tag, there was a storyline, and maybe it was Star Wars or maybe it was superheroes, but there was always this sort of element of a story and special superpowers. I was also, at the same time, I was creating a lot of art. So I drew on everything. I drew all the time. I wrote little poems. I wrote little stories. And a lot of the art that I created, I wouldn't say that the art itself was mystical. I would be drawing pictures of fairies or ballet dancers or princes and princesses and things of that nature. So just like playing make-believe, I was weaving these stories, and oftentimes there would be magic or superpowers or just dreams made manifest in theory by this art. There was always more to it than just a simple drawing. There was always a story behind it. And as I got a little bit older, right, and maybe stopped playing pretend quite so much, I was still reading voraciously, still creating art voraciously or with great passion. And my tastes changed a little bit. I started reading, maybe not kids' books or YA, but things that were considered literature, still a lot of science fiction and fantasy, but also I started to explore other areas of the library, including, I have to admit, parapsychology, where things like academic research on ESP and telekinesis and astral projection, hypnosis, like what was the science behind it, and was any of it really real? That was something that was interesting to me. At the same time, I was also really interested in religion. So I knew a bit about my own religion, but I was interested in all of these other religions. And I read about Roman Catholicism. I read about Eastern religions. I was especially interested in Buddhism. And I was reading things about, existentialism, let's say. And so a lot of these things just kind of wove together in my consciousness. And so when I decided as an adult to get back into magic, if you will, I had this really broad base of things that I had learned over the years and picked up. And I suppose I should also mention, it's highly relevant, that as a preteen, I was very interested in stage magic as well. So I was briefly a magician's assistant as I was trying to learn that trade craft. And around the time I started high school, sometime between middle school and high school, I discovered a local metaphysical shop. And while I don't remember all of the books that I read, I know things that I read when I got into college, but as far as when my interest was still sort of in this developmental phase, I had tarot cards, and I had maybe The Power of the Witch by Laurie Cabot, maybe Scott Cunningham's Guide to Solitary Practitioner, just kind of casual reading though, because as I mentioned, I was just reading a ton of stuff. That continued through college, reading very broadly across many topics, including religion, including alternative spirituality, including magical processes, including science fiction, including fantasy, including dystopian science fiction, just a really broad base. So that again, as an adult, and by adult here I actually mean way after college, when I was out of an academic environment where folks are typically students of life, and they are experimenting with intellectual frameworks and philosophical frameworks and ideas. When I was out in the real world as an adult, when I decided to get back in touch with my magic, I just had a lot to pull from. And I think that really helped me, because having such a broad base, I just see a lot of parallels and synergies between a bunch of these different practices, theories, ideas, frameworks, and that has been very helpful for me. Now, I mentioned that this is actually about you and how you might start if this isn't something that you're into. If you're a beginner or trying to figure out how to bring magic into your everyday life, where do you start? And so, what I want to say is, I although I have a really broad base because to a certain extent, I have been doing this since I was a kid, and you can't see me, but I'm kind of doing air quotes on that because I think that if you dip your toe in the sort of new age, witchy, magical, existentialist, whatever you want to call it, if you dip your toe into that part of pop culture or the pop culture of this, you will find a lot of folks who say they've been doing this since they were kids. And I don't think that what I grew up with is not a syllabus for anyone. It's definitely not directions. The other thing to keep in mind, though, is that I forgot about all of it. So what I mean is, I graduated from college. I went through one of those stages where I was spiritual but not religious, and didn't really remember that I had done all of these things growing up because I was not asking myself any questions about how I got to where I was. I was just kind of vaguely floating along through life as far as spirituality or as far as reality was concerned, right? Like I didn't have a name for anything that I was doing or thinking. I wasn't thinking about it in that way. It's only in, I guess, reflecting back, given where I am now with my personal beliefs and my personal practices and my daily life, that I kind of wondered about the roots of these things. My resume is the same way, is that it doesn't make any sense at the beginning. It just seemed like I was all over the place. And it has only been through kind of iteration and refinement that my resume has taken me to a place where when I look back, everything makes sense. So when I look back, everything makes sense that it brought me to this perfect position that I'm in right now, meaning exactly where I am. Not that where I am is perfect, but it delivered me, the process delivered me perfectly to my destination, which is who I am, where I am right now. And I suspect that if you decide you want to bring some magic into your life, when you look back at your life, you will see the roots. You will see a path, but only in retrospect. Looking forward, everything is very blurry, but looking back, sometimes things start to make sense. The path that brought me here is a ton of reading, and reading about a lot of different things that on their face were disconnected, but then eventually, I mean, you guys should check out my library. It is cray, but the reading is what got me here. It's not the only thing, by the way. I learned through other mechanisms, just like you do, which is I read a lot, but I also watch videos and I talk to people and I have personal experiences. But I would say the main thing that I did to build my base was to read. Now, what got me here is what got me here, and it's going to be something different for you. And if you're someone who wants to get started experimenting with how to bring magic into your everyday living, I want to encourage you that it is you are in the right place. I'm going to share with you the 3 secrets that I discovered, and by discovered I mean just came up with, around pulling magic into your life. How to start. And so the 3 secrets are, get ready, write this down. This is secret, sacred stuff. The first secret is that everyone has magic. And what I mean by that is, I was mentioning this broad base that I have to build from. You have a base too. However old you are, that's how many years of experience that you have being you. And I know you have superpowers because everybody does. And if you can't think of what those are, I think that you just close your eyes and figure out what makes you weird, what makes you special, what makes you different from everyone else. What are the things that call to you? What are your hobbies? What are the things that you're interested in? The things that pull you over and over again, those are generally the source of your magic. And so what I mean is that, maybe you're a cook maybe you spend time in the kitchen and you make up your own recipes, and you imagine to yourself, this recipe is written, looks great, but I think that if I swapped in strawberries for the tomatoes and peaches for the, what would be in something that's in green beans, I don't know, I'm just making stuff up here, that would hit the palate, that would be amazing, that makes this a summer salad versus a heavy salad. Or maybe you just sort of, you love all of the different spices, and in your head you know how the flavors are going to combine. That's your magic. That's amazing. That's a way of manifesting something that's going to make people happy, make you happy. It's a creation, you're proud of it. Maybe that's your magic. Maybe your magic is that you can read a room, right? Like, you walk into a room and you can sense who has power, who is going to be the clown. You can sense if someone's feeling bad. You can sense if you can sense victory. You can sense jealousy. You can just look across the room, and you can kind of someone's number just as soon as you walk in the room. And and those are both different kinds of power, of energy, of ways of relating back to the world. And there's a lot you can cultivate from that. I think one thing to keep in mind too is that some of our superpowers are born from interest or born from talent. Some are born from trauma, right? Like, there's the things that change us, things that shape us. They can help us along our path. And they're not necessarily always born of love and light, right? But things that have shaped us potentially become tools for us later. And I think that there's something to recognizing what you bring into the room. In any room that you walk into, you kind of know what your tools are, you know what your strengths are, and you know who you are in your core and what your superpowers are. That is a huge part of shaping how you're going to bring magic into your life. Because if you are a kitchen witch, then obviously you can leverage that in the kitchen. You can cook things up. Your spells might be tisanes or teas, or maybe you just infuse love into every meal that you make for you and your family, and that is beautiful magic. If you are someone who reads a room like that, maybe where you will bring magic into your everyday life is that you won't just read a room, you'll push energy into a room. Or if you can sense someone that is in pain, then maybe you can bring them energy to hold space for them and to help them heal. So magic is not just the clairs, right? Like clairsentience, clairaudience. That's one element of magic, but it's not the only one. A lot of magic actually has to do with not just how you experience the world, which is, I think, the clairs, experiencing like the world outside of the world, or the world in advance of the world, if you're using something like clairsentience and divination, okay? But that is how you are experiencing the world, or experiences that you get. But a lot of magic is also experiences that you create. And you create those using your talents and your gifts, and you can create those for other folks. Everyone has magic. That's secret number one. And I think that a great part of magical living is the self-reflection to understand where your strengths are and what lights you up. And that's your responsibility to figure that out and bring that into your game. And then there's a lot of techniques to sort of help fan the flames, right? You figure out what lights you up, and then a lot of what magic is figuring out how to cultivate that, make it on demand, and give it grace to grow so that you can share whatever your gifts are with the world. Okay, secret number 2 is that now is the perfect time to start. So one of the reasons why I mentioned all of these things that I did as a kid is because that is indeed where I sort of believe my journey started. And you'll hear that a lot. You'll hear from some folks might say, "Oh, I had come from a hereditary line. I learned a lot of this from my mom, my tia, whoever they learned from. They learned from folks growing up, or a lot of folks have stories similar to me, which is that somewhere in that preteen range, they started getting interest in the occult, or witchcraft, or magic, or ESP, or what have you, and they started exploring from there, and they have that to look back onto. But if that's not you, that is okay, and there's no need to go back and try and replicate that, because I promise you, when you look back into your history, there's definitely things that you saw or experienced that are part of what is bringing you here right now. And now is a perfect time to start, because where you want to start is where you are right now, and what's interesting to you right now, what your superpowers are right now. Because I just want to mention that although I did these things when I was a kid, I lost it for a while. I mean, I really had no interest in the mystical or religion for many years, and I really did not leverage it. So when I started back up again, in a lot of ways, I started from zero, right? Because I was trying to figure out not what it meant to me when I was a kid. I wasn't running around. Well, I mean, of course, blessings to those who do, but I wasn't running around people's backyards pretending that I was the fairy queen. Actually, I may have done that in the recent past. But I'm saying when I first got started as an adult, I wasn't playing make-believe. I wasn't playing with dolls. I wasn't drawing books and books full of fairy princesses. I was trying to figure out what spiritual framework or philosophy is relevant to me in my life right now. I was trying to figure out resources that are relevant right now, not things that were relevant to people who were coming of age in the 70s or 80s, but for folks who are, in the knots or the teens, or I guess we're in the roaring 20s now. I needed to start from where I was, and so don't be sad that you're starting from where you are, because however old you are, you have that many years of experience under your belt to work from. You have all of the material that you need. That was secret one. Everyone has magic. And now is absolutely the perfect time to start. I mean, like, if nothing else, temporally, what a year we're in, right? If part of, I would say most of what magic is the ability to manifest change. Can you imagine any other year in your life? Now, everybody's lives are different, of course, but like a year within the world that we're in now, like, change is being demanded. So I just think now is a wonderful time to start. A year ago is a wonderful time to start and be in the thick of this now. And if you don't start for another 6 months, I'm sure we're going to be dealing with lots of change then. But like right now, if now is when you have the interest, then now is the perfect time to start. Okay, and now the third secret, I think this is really key. It has to go along with now being a perfect time to start, which is, the third secret is being magical or having magic in your life isn't actually about knowing stuff. It's about being willing to go and figure out stuff. So I'm going to say that again. Being magical isn't actually about knowing stuff. It's about going and figuring out stuff, and that willingness to do that. So no matter when you started, no matter how long you've been doing this, and there are a lot of folks who they are masters. They are theologians, or they are researchers, or they have been practicing for years and years and years, and I have the utmost respect for that. And given my flair for book learning, kind of expect that I'm a bit of a scholar, I'm a bit of an academic, like I love to read. So you know that I have such high respect for that. That said, no one knows everything. No one, and if you are pursuing higher truths or mundane truths or just a fun factor, there's always something else that you're going to need to know. And so being able to cultivate that beginner's mind is really critical. Couple reasons. I think that witchcraft and magic, there is a philosophy that they're experiential traditions, meaning you can't learn everything from a book. You have to do it to experience it. I think there's merit to that. I also, again, much love for books. But while it is experiential, I think that that willingness to approach things with it's going to be different every time. And being experiential is akin to being experimental, and experiments don't always work. I mean, scientists are folks who they will try 99 times in order to get the one that will work, right? You have to be willing to approach things with new eyes and expect that things are going to go how you don't expect. So a part of beginner's mind is that willingness to fail. It's the willingness to go through the experience just to have the experience and not being super attached to the outcome, which, by the way, is very Zen and very Hindu, like very yoga, right? You're willing to go through the experience in order to have the experience, but you are detached from the outcome because you don't even necessarily know what to expect from the outcome. The purpose is the experience, and then the outcome is whatever it is. That's part of beginner's mind, that willingness to fail or to at least be detached from the outcome because you don't necessarily even know what to expect. The other part of beginner's mind, though, that is just so important, I think, for bringing magic into your life is that there's joy. There's joy in the experience. There's joy in the surprise of, if you don't know what the outcome is, then it's lovely. You can just enjoy it, that you had the experience and that there was an outcome. It's kind of like an Alice in Wonderland quote, like, which way should I go from here? Well, where are you trying to go? And the answer is, I don't know. I'm not sure where I'm going. And so the answer is, so it doesn't matter which direction you go in. But go, try it, enjoy it. I just feel like one of the coolest things about letting magic back into your life, because I bet you had it once. I bet you're just like me. I bet you had it once and then you forgot. But when you let magic back into your life, you are able to get just such joy out of small, tiny things. Like a terrible, silly example. So it's around the 4th of July, and I was thinking about this book that I read when I was a kid called The Fragile Flag. And I was just thinking, wow, it was part of such a witchy little series. It took place in Boston. Did I already mention it on this episode? I feel like I've been talking about it over and over again. There's sort of there's transcendentalists in it, and I just, really love that series. And I was in my garage looking through some boxes trying to find a little tin with some stuff in it from when I was a kid. And I peeled up the top of a box, and in it was all the other books in that series, which I didn't even remember that I had even owned as a kid, but there they were. And there were, and there was Alice in Wonderland, and there was some Lloyd Alexander, and like all these books that I had read as a kid were just sitting there, and it was kind of stunning. And And there's that serendipity. I had just been thinking about it. I had just been thinking about that book. I wasn't looking for these books. I didn't even remember that I owned them. And I was just thinking about that other book and thinking, maybe I should see how much they cost on Amazon because I'd like to read them again as an adult. And I open a box and look, there they are. Like, to me, that's magic. To me, it's enjoyable. It's a little bit of serendipity. Is it just a coincidence? Is it confirmation bias? Sure. Okay, cool. That's fine. I mean, that's fine too. The magic is not that there was a spell or that something supernatural happened. The magic is that I got that little flare of joy. To me, that's the magic. And that's a big part of bringing magic into your life, is that you are curious and that you recognize and that you do get that little light in you, that little joy lamp flips on, the little flashlight just clicks for a second. To me, that's what magic is. It really is a way of accessing joy. All right, so I told you a little bit about how I got here, which was basically straight through the library. And then the 3 secrets of bringing magic into your life. Everyone has magic. Now is the perfect time to start. And being magical isn't actually about knowing stuff. It's about being willing to go and figure stuff out. With that in mind, though, I will make a couple of book recommendations or resource recommendations for folks who are interested in exploring particular topics. I think that there are some, first of all, witchy YouTube. There are so many great channels out there. And a lot of those creators have not only YouTubes, but Patreons too, if you want to go more in depth, if you dig any of their styles. So I'm big fans of Joanna DeVoe, Kellyanne Maddox, Molly Roberts. Actually, the list is so long, I think what I'm actually going to do is I will just come up with a list and I will attach it to the show notes. But there are some amazing YouTube creators who share experiences, and then some of the creators also share their practices, which I think is kind of fun. In addition to this very fine podcast, which I hope that you're subscribed to, maybe even on more than one platform, just because that would be helpful. There are a ton of podcasts out there too. So I like The Witch Wave, hosted by Pam Grossman. I think that one's fun. She does a really good job of curating that. Joanna DeVoe has a podcast. The Witches Be Sippin', I think, is another one that I've been listening to. Down at the Crossroads. And then there's a ton. Byron Ballard, who is an Appalachian folk magic practitioner out of Asheville, has a podcast. Ton of podcasts. And books. So books is really hard, guys, because let me explain why. So beginner books in witchcraft and magic, there are a lot of them, and to a certain extent, I think go to bookshop.org or a local bookstore and just check out your occult/new age/ metaphysics section. Better yet, go to a local metaphysical shop or order from them online. Things are weird right now. I get it. To a certain extent, I almost feel like just do some biblio-shelf-mancy of your own and pull a book that looks interesting to you, and then maybe one or two others for comparison. I like Witchcrafting by Phyllis Curott. I also like Magic Without Peers by Ariadne Rainbird and David Rankin. Those I both find really interesting, but I'm not sure what it would feel like to read them if they were my first books to read. For me, I think that they are good overviews, and so I think that they provide a nice I think they provide a nice entry point for beginners. When I was a beginner, I read Power of the Witch by Laurie Cabot, the Scott Cunningham Guide to Solitary Practitioners. I also read Spiral Dance by Starhawk and Drawing Down the Moon by, sorry, I'm just actually like Margot Adler, sorry, by a bookshelf. That's what happens. But those are dated, which maybe you'll find that sort of funny, but as what I was saying about start wherever you are. The resources that are available to you right now, if you were to read them in 10 or 15 years, they would actually be dated. Because just like what's normal in consensus reality right now changes, folks' philosophical frameworks and methods for practicing different things from herbalism to devotional practices, it changes over time. So if you were to read Starhawk or Scott Cunningham's books right now, you can tell that they were written in a certain time and place, and we don't live there anymore. That said, I still think they're both fun reads. I just think that for what you're interested in, depending on what you're interested in exploring right now, you might want something that is a bit more contemporary. Let's see. I actually have some other books to recommend too. These you wouldn't find in the metaphysical section, but I think these are useful for folks who, especially if you are on the skeptic side of the curve, you're not really sure that you're a seeker, you're not sure if you need magic to be tied up in your spirituality. I would recommend a couple books. I'd recommend The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, which is about bringing art back into your life. And the creative process and magic are so intertwined in my mind. I think this is a really nice book to sort of help pave a path if you are, let's say you're non-witchy, but you want some magic in your life. I think that the Julia Cameron book is really good. I also really like, I'll just say them, and then we can talk about them later if you want. The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, which is basically about how your feelings become embodied, whether you like it or not. like anxiety has effects on your blood pressure and your heart rate, right? Like PTSD, you relive trauma. That's an emotional, psychological, it's a memory experience, and then it can have effects on your body. So just simply the concept of how our feelings and our thoughts are embodied, I think is really, really interesting to explore. I also like Super Better, The Power of Living Gamefully by Jane McGonigal. So I don't know how to describe that other than if you're a gamer, or if you have ever struggled with, let's say, depression, how you can kind of come up with hacks to get yourself out of that situation. I just think it's a cool read. It's a fun read. It's like pop sci, but it is about how to change how your mind works. And I think mental health issues, it's best to work with doctors because they're health issues. But if you're looking for alternatives, or you're sort of interested in incorporating in some science-based fun as self-care, I think Super Better is really good. It's also about habit hacking to a certain extent, so it doesn't have to have that mental health element to it, but that's part of Jane McGonigal's story, is that she attempted to gamify some things that she felt she needed to do to improve her mental health, and it worked for her. And I think some of the things that she explores in the book are really interesting. And the last book recommendation I'll make is, I think it was on an Oprah list probably, Big Magic, Creative Living Beyond Fear by Elizabeth Gilbert. Yes, the Eat, Pray, Love Elizabeth Gilbert. I just really loved this book. Now I listened to it. This is the audiobook, and she read it, and I think it came out, well, it must have come out about 3 years ago, because I think I listened to it in the car on my big move. So I just really liked, again, this is another one where the creative process and magic are so intertwined. In reading some of these books, I just think trying to differentiate between the creative process and magic is hard for me, because for me they are the same. So this was a really interesting exploration of some of the principles of creativity and how you incorporate it more in your life. So I think it's a good companion piece to the Julia Cameron book, if you like that. Now, I think I probably am going to do a separate episode on how to read books on magic, because this is interesting. I read novels. When I read novels, I curl up, I read that thing straight through. It tends to hold my attention. We're good. When I read an academic book, I need to sit at a desk. I need to have the book in front of me. I need to have like 5 highlighters, 3 pens, and a notebook. And I come up with a process for how I highlight, what I note in the margins, what I put in the notebook. It's a whole thing. Some of it is elaborate in order to allow me to get through academic books one chapter at a time. An academic book, sometimes that means textbook, sometimes it means difficult nonfiction book, sometimes it means really old book, meaning dense. Some of these dense books that are like highly theoretical, but not necessarily a textbook. That's a second way of reading. And then I sort of think that I'm just going to summarize that how to read most books on magic is like reading a cookbook. And what I mean is that cookbook, you're given recipes, which is actually kind of what spells look like when they're written in books, right? If you're reading that kind of magic book. So cookbooks are not meant to be read curled up on the couch. You also probably wouldn't require an army of highlighters. The thing about a cookbook is that it's a book that you do. Eventually you're going to go through, you're going to pick a couple of recipes, you're going to make the thing. And a recipe, if you read, some recipes take 30 minutes or 20 minutes. Some recipes take 45 minutes to an hour and a half, right? And you need things, you need ingredients. So books on magic are roughly the same way. And in the sense that a lot of the books that you might find in mainstream bookstores are books that include lots of spells. And so in those cases, you get it. You're going to need ingredients if you're going to do any of those things. But beyond that, a lot of books on magic are books that you do. I think the Julia Cameron book, Artist's Way, is a good example of a book that you do. She models the book after a 12-step program. And so she wants you to take a week for each step. So Artist's Way is a book that if you do the book, you're going to take 12 weeks. You're going to go through, you're going to do some of the exercises that she recommends. You don't just read the book, you do the book. And books on magic are the same way, including there's some that will mimic the idea of a year and a day experience, which is a year's worth of study. And so which case a section or a chapter might be associated with a month or a moon cycle or something like that. So I guess maybe I won't need to do that separate episode on how to read a book, but I would recommend that depending on if you flip through it, you'll kind of get a sense, I think, about whether it's a book that you can read, which will be mostly about sort of philosophy and maybe some history and ideas, or if it's a book that you are going to want to do, in which case, get some supplies. You probably need a calendar. And you maybe an app or a website where you can go and you can look up moon phases and things like that. Pens and pencils. You probably need a journal for some of these things. But it's just good to know when you go out that no matter how fast you read, you won't be you won't be done after you've read it from cover to cover, if that kind of makes sense. If you've read it from cover to cover, that doesn't mean you've done anything. And I mentioned before, like, there's a lot to be said for magic being an experience. We want to have magic and do magic and bring magic in. And just reading about it provides a useful base. It provides material to draw from, but then you need to use that material in order to make something, in order to make magic. So I hope that is helpful. Some thoughts on what one needs to do to get started. And I think that it's one of the things I love about magic is that you start from wherever you are. You work with what you have, and it's lovely. So good luck with the rest of your week, with your month, with getting started if you're about to get started. And hit me up on the socials or via email. I'd love to get more questions. That's really fun. It's more fun when I can answer people's questions and create content and host discussions that folks find useful. So go make some magic. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Mystic Praxis, and we would love it if you would hit subscribe wherever you found us, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, or straight from our RSS feed at mysticpraxis.com. Don't forget, you can also give us feedback and find us live on your favorite social platforms. We are Mystic Praxis on both Twitter and Instagram, and you can email us at mysticpraxis@gmail.com.